I've had let's call it a rather contentious relationship with cops in my life. I've been hassled more than I've been helped for sure. And that was mostly as an adolescent. In recent decades, I haven't had a lot of personal experience with cops, so it's mostly that early experience that still informs my general opinion of law enforcement officers. That and the all too frequent media coverage of bad cops, racist cops, and just downright fucking sadistic cops misappropriating authority, usually on people of color or mentally ill people. Um, but a while back, we had Nurse Lexi on a podcast, and Lexi, if you'll recall, was an ER nurse, and it always struck me as fascinating vocation. So I wanted to do more episodes like that when somebody has a job where I want to know about it. Uh, I get to just ask them questions. I love asking people about their jobs. So I was really excited when I met this cop, Bill Koontz, because he said he'd let me do that with him. So we're having Officer Bill today, who's recently retired after 23 years on the police force. Bill used to work at the Crocodile Cafe, which is a frequent 90s hang and celebrated music venue here in Seattle, which was right away a surprise. Um, he came to one of my book events, and we had a great conversation afterwards about books and music and art. And it came out that Bill had been a cop, which was fascinating to me because I wasn't getting a cop vibe at all out of the guy, which is to say, I wasn't smelling bacon. And I thought, here's my opportunity to get an inside look at law enforcement. So please welcome this week's Fresh Face in Hell, Officer Bill Koontz.
Hi, Johnny.
Hi, I know, retired Officer Bill Koontz, but I'm calling you Officer Bill Koontz because you've only been a year or two off the force, right?
Yeah, and I technically retired as a sergeant, but no rank matters anymore.
So now I've known quite a few cops in my day. Shout out to Dale Duffy, who is my cop consultant on all my books. Whenever I have I run into any kind of thing that involves a cop in a book. It's happened 4 or 5 times. My man Dale Duffy is right there for me. But I also used to feed a few cops at my cousin's pasta bar downtown at the Pike Place Market back in the 90s. McCurley and O'Connell. Yes, I know it's a trope, but they were both Irish. And they were pretty cool, but I'll be honest, they always made me a little nervous, even if I wasn't breaking any laws. Cops have always made me a little, nervous. I'm nervous now, can you tell? But Bill, you're sort of different than a lot of cops in my experience. For one, you're just more progressive. Um, so when I ran into you at my reading the other night, you were telling me that you had hung out at the Crocodile, which everybody in Seattle knows what that is, but it was a prime Belltown music venue in the 90s. How did you end up there? Were you working security? I mean, what were you doing at the Crocodile? Were you just hanging out seeing shows?
I started as the head of security before they opened. I was hired, and then eventually took over the booking. So while also still handling security.
That's an interesting leap. So, like, that's not, what I'd like to do is dispel some cop rumors today. You know what I mean? Because, like, I like talking to you because you're a cop I like. My relationships with cops have not always, I was a little punk rock kid, so they were kind of contentious oftentimes. But you strike me as different. What made you want to be a cop?
I actually did not have a desire to be a cop. I didn't really like the police growing up. I was a pot smoker, beer drinker, cut school. Nothing evil, just mischievous. But I had a couple of interactions with police that were positive, and I guess I was surprised that those guys could be cool or treated me with respect and handled things at like the minimum level, like, go on, kid, don't smoke weed here. When I thought they were always just going to be the fun police and would drag me into jail for anything and everything. I think that planted the seed to be not so broad with the brush that I painted the police with. And then it just kind of segued from doing some investigations when I was in the military and working with civilian police forces, seeing kind of behind the curtain and realizing how wrong my opinions were that I got from the media and movies and television.
That's awesome. I want to dig into that because I mean, I know there's a lot of that. And I'm going to ask you some hard questions. I always do. Now you spent all those years, I think you said 22, 23 years on the force. Last
23.
you were in 20, and was that all in Linwood? Linwood is a suburb in North Seattle. Tell us about the community you policed in Linwood.
So just to the north of Seattle, like most cities, you can't tell where Seattle stops and Shoreline begins, and Mall Lake Terrace and Linwood all kind of run together on one concrete jungle. Um,
But the place does have like a civic identity. Linwood's kind of a specific place in a way.
and
It's
it's
not
changed a lot.
Edmonds. It's not Edmonds.
Right.
Let's put it that way.
It's gone a lot more in that direction in the last decade, especially socioeconomics. And I like to think that some of the things that the police were doing were working in a positive way. Um, but yeah, we have a stretch of Highway 99, so that's always going to have some excitement. There's a element of crime that travels up and down Highway 99 to
Yeah,
stay off
Aurora,
I-5.
as we also know it, and
Right.
that's what mostly prostitution, right? And what kind of crime follows that? Drugs and
Drugs is behind, you know, everything, honestly. 95% of crime is driven by drugs and alcohol and people who have substance abuse issue. The section of Linwood had a lot of things that the Seattle section of Aurora has, skeezy hotels, a lot of trying to stay out of the public eye so that you can use and deal and steal and break into buildings and rob people and um, deal with your addictions in destructive ways without a lot of people calling the police or drawing attention to it.
there used to be hotels up and down that strip that I think some of them had like hourly rates and stuff like that. Are many of them tenant hotels at this point? I mean, are there people that, skeezers and drug dealers or people that just kind of go from, because when I was working in Silicon Valley in the early 80s doing telemarketing, everybody I worked with lived in like a Cozy 8 hotel or a Cozy 8 motel. Like they just lived and paid a weekly rate. And they were former prostitutes, all drug addicts, but
So Linwood has none of the element that was there when I started. The most problematic hotel that we had faced some pretty serious consequences from the city and from, I think, their own way of doing business. And they cleaned up. They spent a lot of money and got a Super 8, franchise in there. And they don't take cash anymore. You have to have a credit card. And we were, of course, used to going there and finding a lot of things to address, major warrants, stolen cars, and it just
ODs probably too, right?
Oh yeah, fights. 1 year, I think we averaged 270 calls there in a
from
year.
one motel.
Correct.
Not bad. Well, they took a few days off.
And
90 days off.
when that dries up, that's obviously a huge plus for the community. And I don't know where those people are dispersed to, but
That would be my next question. Because it just seems like they just spread out, but they're still going to be in the community,
right.
or they're going to, yeah, I don't know. It would be interesting to track that. What happens when you clean up that place? I know that when they used to clean the homeless out of Pioneer Square and they just sort of disperse, not even that far, just it would become a wider and wider kind of concentric movement south. Mostly, and then up the hill some too. So one thing I've been dying to ask you, because it's the one thing I ever, it's a tough time to be a cop in terms of the press because you don't get too many human interest, officer-friendly stories. You don't really hear those heroic stories on the news. It's always like, some cop's got his body cam on and he's beating the shit out of somebody. You know what I mean? So I understand that there's gonna be good and bad, of all kinds of people, and the media tends to, hey, if it bleeds, it leads. But I've always wondered about the whole cop brotherhood thing. Like, there's so many crooked cops. Why don't the good cops ever call out the bad cops? In the movies and television, I'm thinking of Better Call Saul here. I mean, they'll kill you, or they'll like if you will be ousted if you call out the bad cops. So there's this idea, and maybe much of this is really born of television and film. But like, there's this brotherhood of cops where you turn a blind eye to graft because they're cops, and that's a no-no. It's like cheating on your best friend's girl or something, like that kind of male brotherhood. So like, tell me about that. Is it real?
Well, the police is a pretty broad brush, and I'm not here to be a cheerleader for everybody who wears the badge. There are absolutely people out there who do not do this job well and should not be in that profession. That being said, there is a history, right? We had the Rampart things going on down in LA where there was like an entire squad of guys who were covering for each other and doing a bunch of, dirty shit under the guise of the police. In Washington, which is all I can speak for, and I know cops from other parts of the country, we have a duty to intervene now. So if you see somebody who's even just using too much force, it's incumbent upon you to stop that. You can lose your badge if you don't intervene. And I think that's a good thing that people don't talk about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I that's the first I've heard of it. I mean, I know now with the body cams, people are, I mean, they're just monitoring it more. It's like everything's supposedly recorded, but like, I've just always wondered, it just doesn't seem like the police police the police enough. Like the good cops don't like, because I met some asshole cops, dude. Just like
Absolutely.
some
And
fucking power abusing, and they're the ones that get all the play. That's what everyone thinks a cop are. I mean, look at, I'm clearly prejudiced against cops. I like you, but you can tell. I mean, I'm sweating over here. Okay, see how red I am? I'm just talking to a cop. I feel like
I get nervous when they're behind me in a car, and I was one of them. So I understand that. If I wanted to be liked by everybody, I wouldn't be a cop and I wouldn't be an atheist. But no, it's
So
a good
talking
point.
about ratting out the bad cops. Why doesn't it happen more?
I think it does, and you don't hear about it. Like, and also,
Okay.
if you do it right, like there's a duty to intervene. That came about post George Floyd. You had these officers that were new. They were intimidated of this senior officer who's literally leaning on somebody's neck until they're dead. And they were intimidated by him. They were still in training. They're not going to tell their field training officer, hey, you need to get off that guy. Now it's possibly the end of their career if they don't intervene. So if that intervention is happening now, we're preventing those stories.
Right, because somebody with a cell phone's taping that, and they can say, "Hey, what the fuck were you doing? You're
Or
just standing right there."
our own
Yeah.
body cameras, right? Your body
Right.
cameras. Hey, you're the closest officer, and you see that guy is starting to throw punches as this guy is, complying. Why didn't you stop him? And a lot of officers would have stepped in. Several times in my career, I could see an officer kind of losing his shit, and it's like, hey, man, I got this. I'll transport him. I think he's pushing your buttons. I saw a cop get, spit in his face, a complete unload right at point blank. And I knew that cop was on the edge of probably doing something stupid. And I didn't want to be a witness to that. I didn't want him to ruin his career. I didn't want to have to tell on him. So just, hey, man, take a couple of step back. Let's let some other people come in here and deal with this guy because I think you're on the edge of maybe doing something stupid. So
Yeah,
those kinds of
Oh.
interventions kind of take away the stories that would be, on Channel 7 that night.
I know one ways, and I mean, you see a difference in policing regionally too, like LA versus New York, for instance, and I think what part of the problem, so like there was a lot of problems with the LA police force. There's the Rampart stuff you mentioned, a lot of inside graft, that kind of thing, but there was also just sort of a militaristic attitude because they were so outnumbered. Like, that's why, I mean, I remember moving to LA in the early '90s, and the first day I moved into my duplex, I'm like, there's a helicopter with a flat, I mean, it was otherworldly to me. There was, like, a helicopter with a floodlight, like, right in my backyard, like, just going over my dog and everything, and it was just kinda surreal. And then you find out that there's, like, 1 cop for every 4,000 people in LA County or some crazy thing like that, and whereas in New York, they got, like, a cop for every 200 people. You got guys walking the beat and stuff like that. So I think, like, I think the LA cops, a lot of them just felt so outnumbered that they had some sort of fucking, like, riot crew, ideology, like us or them, and we're outnumbered kinda thing. Like, maybe that contributed to it, or
I lived in Long Beach myself from 87 to 90, right before I moved up to Seattle. And I know exactly what you're talking about. And Long Beach cops messed with Navy guys. I was in the military down there stationed and saw some things that pissed me off and were unprofessional and would get you bounced from the squad, even in Long Beach today. I don't know how much of a turnaround they've had, but I would imagine that things have progressed there as well, especially with body cameras and things rolling out. But you're right, it's different from city to city. There are agencies not too far from here that I could not work for, and it may not be any fault of the people in leadership.
But because of your personal, like, I don't want part of that, or because they don't want you? What do you mean by that?
Uh, Probably both, honestly.
Okay.
I'm a little too progressive and maybe a little too, hey, these people are mentally ill and their drug addiction is not 100% a personal choice.
So, like, I mean, so that would be like an interview thing. Like, if they would interview you, and if they got that vibe off you, they wouldn't want you in their force. Like, that's not how we do things up here, and whatever. I don't
I
want to give a town a bad name.
I think you can tell when you're a good fit, and if you do your homework when you're, hiring as an officer is very competitive. I would walk into a room with 64 people to test, and they're going to hire maybe 4 of us. So you had to think that you were going to be one of those 4, or else you might as well turn around and walk away. There's also agencies that are not, well funded, so they maybe don't have body cameras. They're not going to attract, uh, guys with college degrees in criminology
Yeah,
because
recruiting seems to be a big problem,
it's, you know,
as it is with the military often. I mean,
and you don't have to go to the South or someplace that's impoverished, just maybe a city that's not got a huge retail base. They don't have money for body cameras. They don't have money for background checks that are uh, as thorough as they should be. You know, Power structures attract people, and good people and bad people. How do you keep the people who don't belong in the job away if you don't have money to do a lot of expensive interviewing and psychological profiling? Um, just getting a room full of administrators takes time and money to do an interview to see if this guy has the right personality to fit with your department and be a professional.
so but going back to power structures, I mean, power does corrupt, right? I mean, there are guys that clearly became cops because they want to be the guy, they want to be the. And then there are probably guys that got into the force that probably just got worn down, saw a side of crime that the rest of us don't always see from the inside, and probably ground him down to a nub and probably changed who he was. And, I mean, like, we are our experience, right? I mean, I guess this all kind of dovetails into the recruiting process. Like, who do you think's becoming a cop now? I mean, do you think when I was a kid, you go back to the 60s and it was like officer friendly. He's handing out, basketball cards, and like, he's doing this thing, hard candies or something. You know what I mean? There was like some community outreach, and like, he was a good guy. Look, kids, you could grow up and be him. And like, there was a Lone Ranger element to it. And then I don't know what happened, the 80s. I mean, like, I don't know exactly what I'm getting to, but I know that we as a culture are pretty guilty of profiling cops. You know what I mean? Like, they do get a bad name when I know that there's some good ones out there, even if I've only met 2 now.
Well,
But
the police are guilty as well because for a long time we were very insular, right? Like hey, we can't make these people understand they're civilians, and that lack of communication and transparency did not serve us well. So I think being more open and social media engagement and like sincere engagement. Hey, admitting to screwing up, making disciplinary actions public instead of
right, accountability is
right.
everything. Yeah.
And the hiring question is different, like I said, from community to community. If you have an impoverished community, I knew a guy who was a southern state, was making $18 an hour in a very violent, very scary place to be a police officer. A super smart guy, master's degree, spoke a bunch of languages that he learned in the Marine Corps, being a translator, and a really good guy.
And he was just a beat cop?
Yeah, and a
Wow,
very
so, I mean, I mean, from like the, whatever, my cultural standards, I would call that overqualified. That's not, this is again, I mean, I know I'm stereotyping here, but
Hence why he came out west to earn a little bit better money and to be compensated for his education. A lot of departments will give you money based on the degree that you have and encourage you to, maybe get your master's. I know an officer that's getting her PhD right now. Also, cities like the one that I worked for are hiring a very broad spectrum of officers. I got to work with my first Muslim officer who breaks out his prayer rug in the locker room for his prayer. That was kind of a head scratcher the first time. I'd never seen that, and I've been in the locker room a long time, and it was cool.
hey, man, I'm just glad to see pluralism alive and well, you know what I mean? I like to see these clashes of culture. That's what makes America great to me.
Right.
I hate this flattening of the culture where there's just everything, and that seems like what cop culture often does is sort of flattens the culture. Like, you're a cop, it's us against them.
Um, yeah, and the qualifications, I would say still in parts of the country that don't have a lot of resources are, hey, you're big, you're white, you played football, and you graduated high school. That's not a great way to represent your community. We have a lot of female officers who I was around when that was relatively new, and I think people were looking to see if it was window dressing, and I'm very proud to have worked with some really kick-ass officers who just have their sex organs in a different place. But I would absolutely go into a hot call with them without any reservations.
This is gonna be a hard question to ask, but, like, are most of the women cops, are they still? Because I know how in the '80s, if you were a woman cop, you were more tough, probably kind of built a certain way, kind of a little more butch than, like, Angie Dickinson or whatever.
I think it's a broad spectrum now. We have
Yeah, that's good.
very petite, very soft-spoken women who had to learn how to, use a more persuasive or present voice. They had to have an officer presence, and some of them had to work a little harder at that than others. But you're right; they actually bring a different perspective. Imagine, having your bell rung as a female by your spouse or partner, and maybe another 6'3" white guy like me coming through the door is not who you want to talk to you about having your ass beat just now. But maybe
Yeah,
a
that's a good
female
point.
officer, they can really bring a hot call down in a lot of respects, maybe just by being present. Maybe a guy who was going to fight you all is like, I don't swing on a female. It does happen, but I know
So,
some people who they're
machismo beats itself.
right.
Yeah, well, okay, so walk me through a day in the life of Bill Koontz, law enforcement officer. We did this with Nurse Lexi. I just wanna, I mean, you can make it an eventful day, but kinda walk me through, like, what does this routine look like? Because we don't see behind the curtain unless we're getting booked.
Well, and every day is different, right? That's one of the things that I
Right, but I
miss
mean, just a
about the
routine, you
job.
show up there,
You
you go
know,
out and I mean, and then what kind of things you might see, hypothetical,
hop in your
juice
you
it up
have
a little for me.
your shift briefing, which I usually tried to, they're mostly enjoyable. You have a lot of joking around and, you're talking about serious stuff and goals for the day. And hey, news from last night, we have problems in this park with people overdosing on fentanyl. So let's do some walkthroughs.
So it
Uh,
really is like Barney Miller and that, or no, Hill Street Blues was the one that would do that, right? They would have that. And Lexi described something certain where they got to with the nurses, the ER nurses, they all got together first and you did this briefing. So there really is that thing where everybody's in the same room and like the commanding officer's talking to everybody. This is kind of the docket and
Sharing information, making sure that you're up on topics. Hey, that guy we were looking for on our last shift was picked up by Snohomish County last night, so he's not around. Staying current keeps you from wasting time or duplicating effort. After shift briefing, you carry your bags and your rifle and all that out to your car. You get set up, log in, let the dispatcher know that you're available for calls, and there's usually some calls holding. If there's not, you usually grab a caffeinated drink and maybe talk to some of your favorite buddies about what your goals for the day are. If you're going to have some self-directed patrol, stuff that you want to work on personally.
Really? So you have that's an eye opener for me. Like I mean, they're like, if you're not on a call, then you're sort of policing on your own, and you have like little projects.
Yeah. I mean,
What is
you're
that?
alone.
Give me an example of one of those.
I had a soft spot in my professional heart for addicts, especially with fentanyl. We had a park where people were overdosing frequently, and I would walk through there to make sure that people didn't need help, or if they needed an ambulance, that they knew that they weren't in trouble, that I was just going to make sure that they weren't, dying. And then having a talk with them if they're fine, but they're clearly smoking fentanyl in a place where we would prefer, families can walk their dogs. We'd talk to them about getting help or services that were available.
But you don't kick them out, or I mean, like, because where are you going to kick them? I mean,
We usually gave them hey, we're just having a conversation right now, but if this continues to be a problem, I'm gonna have to trespass you from the park, and I don't want to do that. And eventually, if they didn't get the message, we had a phrase that's still in effect, called compassion with boundaries. We can't have this conversation 3 and 4 times. I'm not going to start from square one every time. And so we'd give them a chance to meet us halfway, or, be more discreet. I am not going to stop you from using drugs, but could you do it somewhere where I'm not going to get complaints because Gladys is walking her, French bulldog through here and doesn't want to see you gacked out on fentanyl and she thinks you're dead. We got to find a way to not live all over the rest of the community.
okay, well, that seems very diplomatic, and I think some people, your law and order people, are like, well, why the fuck didn't you just pick them up and arrest them?
Well, and we did. There were people that would eventually either have a significant health problem or, these people are in the life of an addict. And, if it was the 3rd time that I caught them there, I'd run their name. And if they had a warrant, I'd be like, hey, man, you and I have had this conversation. It's time to go to step 2. And I wish we didn't have to, but I'm going to go ahead and confirm your warrant, take you into custody on that. If only to keep you alive for another few days until you see a judge. And
Right,
if you,
so he'll get sprung in a couple days, most likely.
depending on what he's got going on.
Yeah, but you could keep him. I mean, it keeps him off drugs. But what happens when you pick up one of these guys and you're going to lock him up for a couple of days and he goes into DTs or like withdrawal?
Well, there is a medical component in jail. And once again, in some communities, it's probably window dressing and not very effective and not a very safe place for a withdrawing addict to be. The jails that we work with and the one that Linwood is starting up now are very serious about taking care of the people that are in our custody. And they spend a lot of money. We're getting ready to open a community resource center where addiction and mental health care is this door, law enforcement and judges are that door. Maybe let's try this door. What do you think?
That's smart. I like it.
It's less expensive than what we're doing, and it apparently works better. So, well, in other cultures, Linwood's one of the only municipalities that's doing that at the city level. We know of a couple of counties that are like doing their own treatment centers and trying to find a different path rather than jail to help these people. So we'll see. I'm not afraid to try new stuff and hope that it works and maybe make changes if we have to.
What's kind of depressing about this is that it sounds like changes are highly regionalized and localized. Like it's going to be really hard to change the entire policing culture. But I mean, I guess like anything else, it's hard to change the entire political system too. It's got to start one village at a time. So,
I think if
like,
agencies who are not afraid to try some of these new things are successful with it, like body cameras were fought for a long time. Cops didn't want it. Hey, if I say fuck, I'm going to get in trouble. And that wasn't the case. And if you're doing the job correctly, who cares if you have a whole film crew following you? You want people to know that you're out there doing the job correctly, and that part of your day is spent, finding an autistic kid who wandered away and, pushing an old lady's car out of the road.
So are you gonna get fired if they catch you if you got a few op minutes and you're like, going scrolling through your fantasy football numbers on the clock or something, and it's on
Well,
your camera's not on until you engage, right?
correct.
Right.
And
It's not like the Truman Show where you just
I was a supervisor, and I trusted my guys to stay active, and you can tell from radio traffic. I didn't have to, I can watch their patrol cars on my screen, but I didn't wanna big brother them and, "Hey, you've been at Starbucks for 15 minutes, time to get going." I trusted them to be their own, um, you know, stay self-motivated and don't make me be your boss. And I very rarely had to nudge people to get them to go out and do stuff.
what do you think people's most common misconception about cops is?
Man, that broad brush, there's like federal police officers, there's state patrol officers, and then there's your local sheriffs and your local police departments. They are all most likely very different. So that broad brushstroke, I think, of painting the police as a monolith.
That's why you're here, because I do it. I mean,
Right.
I flat out do it because I'm a dime store hood, you know what I mean? So, like
Well, all the stuff that's going on with ICE right now, I'm the cop whisperer to a bunch of people who don't know a lot about policing, and they don't understand what they're seeing. And I'm like, I don't either. I could not work for that agency, and I don't like a lot of what I'm seeing. And regardless of the context, maybe I don't have the other side of the story, but I see somebody who's not identifying themselves as law enforcement. Their face is covered. They don't have a name tag. They're refusing to identify themselves. They're refusing to show a warrant. That's bad. I don't,
Yeah, so what do
I'm
you
not
do if
cool
a
with that.
cop I know that the administration wants to make it like they want to make them the ICE the highest authority in that situation, but if you're in working the beat in Linwood and some ICE guys come into a restaurant and they're not identifying themselves or as a cop, do you intervene? And I mean, clearly you actually have jurisdiction there, right? But what happens with that dynamic? I mean, have you seen it? Do you know?
I haven't heard of any what we call blue on blue interactions in this area where ICE is causing a dust up and the police are getting called because there's masked, unidentified people breaking into my house. That would be a bad day to show up at that call. And if there's officers who are not identifying themselves, they need to identify themselves to us pretty quickly.
And an ICE officer would have no reason to. Not
I think if they
not
see
to,
us
true,
show
yeah.
up, they maybe consider us to be on the same side, even though philosophically I couldn't be further away from them.
They've
Um,
gotta be getting used to that idea because
right?
most people aren't on their sides, and I would say even your more conservative cops are like, "I don't know about this."
Well, and I don't want to speak for
Yeah, I keep
departments,
making you.
but I can tell you that one of the ones that I'm most proud of is very vocal about if you need help in our jurisdiction, you call 911. Our officers will not ask about your immigration status, and we are not working with ICE. And the chief of police came out that and said that publicly and took some heat for it. And he's like, "That's tough. If you need help in my city, we're going to help you. I'm not going to be concerned about what your Guatemalan visa says."
As it should be.
Right.
So Blue Lives Matter, what does that mean to you?
Uh,
I mean, I know it's not gonna be a popular question, but I mean, it's so broad too, but like
I did not like that as a police officer. If you need to be patted on the back in this job and have everybody like you, maybe this isn't the right job for you. My community was very supportive. I had people apologizing all the time. "Oh, it's so bad what you guys are going through." I'm like, "What are you talking about? I had some lady try to buy me coffee like twice this week." Very well supported, very well treated, and even by people who maybe historically didn't have good relationships with the police when they realized that we weren't going to
Yeah, like
side
the guys
against.
you were telling me about in the park, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, these guys probably don't scatter like roaches when you come into the park because they're like, look, it's Officer Coons. He's going to give us another warning. He's
Well,
going to do
fentanyl takes a
everything.
lot of wind out of their sails to begin with. It's not an athletic performance enhancing drug. They're usually unconscious, and I am about ready to take their pulse before they
It's
come
really hard for
around.
them to keep their pants on, I noticed.
Right.
That's the first thing I see going, and I don't mean this in a to be flippant or humorous, but, like, I see a guy on so many corners, like, one day I walked into Westlake, and there was a guy in every corner with some big old jeans on, and he was, like, nodding, standing up, but his pants were just, like, slowly creeping on all 4 corners.
When I
Maybe
started, crack was still around, and it was segueing to meth, and then oxy took off, and opiates were the thing, and I went from hardly ever seeing heroin to seeing heroin all the time when oxy started drying up. But this fentanyl it's the worst thing I've ever seen. It almost, kind of destroyed an aspect of our interactions with the addicts because they're just a mess. They're um,
and it's like $2 a pill. I mean, it's
yeah.
cheap, and it's not regulated or safe. Not that heroin was, but li I feel
Well,
like
the hook's deeper with fentanyl, and it's harder to kick apparently. And they have to do it so frequently. Like people could shoot up and they'd be good for hours. They smoke a fentanyl pill and they're good for 90 minutes, and then they got to smoke another one.
but if it's so cheap, how does anybody make any money? I
Oh,
mean, cocaine wasn't cheap. Heroin wasn't really cheap.
I think there's a lot of problem with the business model. When it kills so many of your customers, how does the cartel make money? I don't want them to succeed, but it's kind of a head scratcher, right? When you're getting rid of your customer base, which no other drug did with the efficacy that fentanyl has. There's a lot of people that I used to wake up in that park that are not with us anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I've lost, God, probably 13 or 14 friends to, heroin overdoses, over the years, and about God, I'm really bad with years since the pandemic, but I'm thinking it was about 3 years ago, there was one weekend where I knew 3 people who OD'd on the West Coast, and I'm just thinking, that's just like one bad shipment probably that just kinda got dispersed. I
Right.
mean, and that happens. I just what do we do about fentanyl, dude? I mean, it's just it's more rampant than it's easier to deal. You know what I mean? It's not, you're not dealing with dime bags anymore. Somebody could walk around with that thing of Advil, you know what I
Right.
mean? For all intents and purposes. Like,
It's it's really, I think, the worst. I'm not a drugs are bad kind of cop. I understand people have, problems and we're flawed as humans, but I've never seen the amount of destruction, and it's self-evident. A lot of these people know how bad off they are. They have open sores and infections, and they just can't kick it. Their ability to even go, "Hey, I need help," is seemingly not there anymore. And I don't have any good success stories. I have people who still check in with me who are recovered from pick a drug. I do not have a single fentanyl success story yet. I don't know. There might be some out
just
there, but
and as a guy who did every drug in the book, I just wonder what the high's like if people are so rabidly addicted. Like, I mean, like, people doing heroin are talking to their angel. You know what I mean? Like, it's like they're blissed out at least while it's happening. I don't know if I get that vibe from fentanyl or like I don't.
I don't know. Obviously, I had opioids from a doctor, and it didn't flip my switches. So I'm not predisposed to liking, Percocet or hydrocodone. But the addicts that I've spoken to who graduated from heroin or oxy to fentanyl describe it as the difference between snorting cocaine and smoking crack, like a much uh, higher blissed out, but a sharper drop. Um, so somebody who knows about opioids or has had that experience as an addict could, it looks like fentanyl might be extra strength, whereas instead of a beer, this is a shot of 151.
Damn. But then, as you said, the come down's sharper and probably more brutal. Oh boy. Uh Okay, here's one for you. How about defund the police? What does that mean to you?
I think it was a knee-jerk reaction to watching somebody executed on television, and I think people should have been upset, by watching that. I hope that's the society that we live in where that's not okay, and that makes you pissed off. I was pissed off as a police officer. Um, a few seconds into watching that, I had to look away. I was so angry. I don't take it personally. I was not threatened with defunding in my agency. Our community was pretty supportive after the initial understandable anger and that broad brushstroke that was painting all of us. But like I said, if you're not going to be able to take your lumps and you don't have some thick skin, they weren't talking about me and the people that I worked with. So how am I going to be offended by that? I had a phrase, and it dates me as being an old guy, but I used to tell people, I'm like, look, Black Sabbath and the Spice Girls do the same thing, but they don't do the same thing. They don't put out records and they sing into a microphone, but they're very different. And once again, the distinctions between how you do your job and the product that you put out give you the ability to, if you're upset by that, defund the police, maybe you need to be defunded, or you need to take a look at how you're doing business. I also like the aspect of defunding where we take some of the funding for corrections, quote unquote, and punitive measures and try to fix people. That community resource center that's going to take money and put it into treatment and psychology to try to figure out how to better help these people instead of putting that money into the jail. If that's your definition of defunding the police, so be it.
Yeah, no, I kinda like refund the police
Right.
better, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's just allocate money towards, different, instead of, like you say, just completely punitive and corporeal punishment towards, rehabilitation, and, like, a lot of these people, and I know I've just known so many drug addicts, and I know how hard it is, but I mean, and not everyone's gonna take that lifeline, but there are people out there, especially I would think in the mental health sector, you know what I mean, that are just looking for that lifeline. And listen, given the chance to get off the street, given the chance to get three square, given the chance to have somebody listen to them, even if they're just batshit crazy sounding, but so much I think a part of mental health is just listening to people.
I came across a study that showed that people who don't have sleep security, like people who sleep on the streets, imagine if you're a female
Yeah,
sleeping in
that's
a
that
doorway.
PST, yeah, that's PTSD right there.
They put these people in a situation where they could get a good night's sleep, and some of their mental health problems were decreased to where they could come off their medications altogether. And someone who had bipolar and schizophrenia maybe just had to take medication for their bipolarism now, and their schizophrenia went into remission because they were able to sleep regularly from, you know, 11 o'clock at night till 8 in the morning, which they hadn't done probably without having one eye open the entire time.
Sleep security, wow, that's I mean, I mean, how many of these people are schizophrenics and they're homeless and they've just kinda lost their way, and maybe they don't know that they have resources available to them, you know what I mean? Insurance, they probably have Medicaid or something, or I mean, if they have somebody that can help them, like, see out of the moment and, like, "Look, if we take this one step at a time, we can get you insurance, we can get you, we can you can get on your meds, you can."
Right. During COVID, especially, there were days where we dealt with so many mentally ill people that it felt like we were shoveling water out of the ocean. And I remember taking the third or fourth person down to the hospital who was in crisis and thinking I should not be on the front lines for mental health care. That's not what this uniform should be about. I'm glad to help these people, but there's a lot of time and money, and, the emergency room's not going to fix them. It's gonna, you know, get them into a state to where they can maybe be released, and then their mental health crumbles again days or hours later. That sort of refunding the police to where we have something in place that's not armed officers out hurting mentally ill people around the streets to a very expensive healthcare system that they can't access otherwise. It just seems like a ridiculous, it's not what the police are for.
Okay. So, Bill, I mean, you're a really progressive guy. Most progressive cop I've ever talked to.
It
Like,
made me
but
super popular in the police department.
this is where I'm going with this question. How are these woke ideals of yours? I mean, how much pushback did you experience? Like, if you're on a beat with a cop and you're talking and you're like, we could save that guy, you know, what that guy needs is some counseling or something like that. I mean, what kind of pushback were you getting for some of these woke ideals of you?
Thankfully, the people that I worked with, a lot of them were younger because I'm an old guy. And another positive thing that I will point out to people about a lot of the police that I've been working with, the young kids do not have a lot of these same hangups. Sure, some do. But I remember when going to a same-sex domestic violence call was like new, and officers would, be sort of judgmental in their facial expressions. Maybe they were doing a good job with their professional, like trying to figure out what's going on. But I'd be like, hey man, drop the face. This is unusual for you. I get it, but somebody here's our victim and we work for them. So be a professional. These new kids, they don't care. We went to calls with, trans people, which was one of the first for some of them, and it just not an issue to them. I would go there going, hey, are they going to be unprofessional or weird? Or are they going to respect pronouns? They were miles ahead of my generation with like, hey, well, this is not an issue. I felt a little guilty for coming to, make sure that they were going to do it right.
Well, I had a question about, why do you think that, and it makes me, I'm rethinking it now, but, like some of the trades, street level law enforcement does not require a bachelor's or master's degree, but the public perception is often that cops are, you know, just meatheads.
Meatheads.
Yeah. And so do you feel these younger cops you're describing, are they less meatheaded or are they just more used to identity stuff like,
Again,
orientations and so forth?
regionally, even neighboring jurisdictions don't have some of the same requirements that a lot of police departments that are well-funded from larger cities had. You had to have a college degree, at least an associate's, or some military service to even get into the hiring process at the department I worked at. That doesn't mean that because you have a college degree that you're a great person with an open mind, but it says something about you. You could.
I agree completely. I think everybody should go to college just because it's kind of like you used to get this when you were conscripted into the military or something like you're working next to a black guy or a gay guy. You know what I mean? You get,
Right.
It exposes you getting out of your little hometown and going to college, or even if it's community colleges, exposes you not only to ideas, but just social constructs that don't exist in your life before college.
Absolutely. And the military as well. You have kids that were from, West Virginia who had never met a Jewish person or didn't know somebody who had a accent because English wasn't their first language. Plus it gives you a little time to grow up. But there are a lot of agencies that probably don't have their hiring requirements set so high. They kind of have to take who shows up. And I know in some places they haven't been able to hire they haven't been able to fill open positions because people didn't meet their requirements or were clearly not cut out to do that. I don't know if I'm sure there are agencies somewhere that are just like, give us a body because they're desperate. That's obviously not great. What could go wrong? I also
Well, yeah,
feel
the
like,
numbers. Sorry about this, but
yeah,
numbers. Because I was thinking about like, me and my producer Jason were talking about how, man, Seattle used to be lousy with cops before George Floyd. Now, where are they? I mean, like, what happened? Were there massive I mean, maybe I know that's Seattle, not Linwood, but like, where are the cops? There just seems like there's less of them. Is there jobs out there for cops that nobody wants, or is there no more money to hire cops? Which is it?
there has been, used to not be able to have tattoos. What a ridiculous, you know, tattoos that were visible. Now there's cops with full sleeves because we realized that was an antiquated barrier that kept, otherwise very good
Right.
officers for,
It's also quite useful if you're working the motels down in Aurora to, you know what I mean? It
right.
might be like you'd probably be more likely to trust a cop with sleeves than
Unless
one
it's the
without.
Punisher tattoos, but,
Judge Dredd.
right. It's a problem because you want to have people that reflect your community and you want to be able to pick smart people who are going to be able to communicate properly and make decisions in high stress. And even people who go to college don't make it through the police academy. And those who make it through the academy don't make it through field training. There's a lot of hurdles to get to the street, as there should be. But yeah, it's a huge problem to overcome, especially if you don't have money or a population center that gives you a lot of applicants. Compensation is a way that some agencies have, they pay officers really well and, will pay for you to continue your schooling. They got great health care. They have a retirement plan. That's not helpful to agencies that don't have those deep pockets. And I think that's where a lot of our problems
You can't
come from.
incentivize it if you can't afford the incentives, in other
Right.
words.
And who needs good cops more than impoverished communities?
Right, and then they end up getting, like, the guy from, Rod Steiger from,
Or they got hired because their uncle is, a lieutenant.
and your name's like Moose, and you were on the football team, but you were just like a pulling tackle, pulling guard or something. Hey,
Always head first.
so say that what if the current wannabe dictatorial regime moves the National Guard or the military into Linwood or Seattle? How do you see local law enforcement reacting to such an overstep? See, this is what I keep wondering. Is this gonna happen if he keeps sending National Guard in and trying to police the police in these cities? At what point is there I mean, it seems are they just gonna roll over? Are they gonna fight back? I mean, and who really does have jurisdiction there? And I mean, it's just such a gray area. What's gonna happen? What happens if they come into Seattle?
It's a frightening question, and all I can base my answer on is what we've seen in Los Angeles and DC, even though DC is a very unusual situation because of it's not a city, it's not a state. And apparently Pam Bondi's in charge of the police department. So,
So what have we seen in LA and Washington, DC?
I mean, I was watching troops, spread bark. I don't think the local police department's officers are going to be out there helping them spread bark, nor are they going to be worried about that. In places where enforcement actions are happening or where people's, due process and Fourth Amendment rights are probably being violated. I don't know.
So,
I think if I did, I'd be on
are they
tour right
not?
now.
I would expect that that's what their orders would be, to go in there and really stir things up and, like, so, like, if a National Guard person's hassling somebody, it seems like the Linwood cop would be able to say, "Hey, listen, I got this. This is my turf. I
Well,
got
they're
this for
not,
you."
as far as I can tell, they're not working with the local PD. The, feds and the National Guard are going in and doing whatever they're going to do. And I don't know what the local police are doing, but
Well, then what are they doing? I mean, besides spreading bark, are they just there? Is this just a, like, a show of is just as a power play? I'm gonna show you what it looks like, just to sort of desensitize people to the idea of, like, martial law or something? Like, I
I
mean,
think that that's a good argument to be made.
yeah,
I
so
think
you
this is
think it's
a
more performative than anything. So,
well,
like,
if he was if the goal was to quench crime, they would go to Memphis before they'd go to DC. They'd go to, Jackson, Mississippi. There's a lot of places where the crime rate is much higher than Washington, DC. So clearly some of this is, creating, the fear of crime and how horrible these cities are, and I don't think it's a mistake that they're, picking on Los Angeles instead of Memphis, based on its location and the color of the political party that runs that state. And I think they're putting law enforcement in a very precarious and dangerous situation. Like I said, if somebody's breaking into your house in the middle of the night and they have a balaclava on and aren't identifying themselves as law enforcement and the police show up, bad things could happen.
yeah, I'm surprised we haven't seen more of that in the news, or maybe I'm not watching the news enough. I haven't seen a lot of specific, like, policing abuses or anything that the National Guardsmen have, perpetuated so far that has local law enforcement, up in arms, nor have I really heard that much protest from local law enforcement, but again, maybe I'm not paying enough attention. I mean, I feel like I haven't really heard from the DC police or the LA police on the matter.
Yeah, I think I think we're still working it all out. I think it's different from city to city, it seems. Um, these ICE raids seem to be focusing on a building or a Home Depot or a particular business that if no one's calling there with a complaint, the locals aren't going to show up. And if you hear that, hey, ICE is doing raids there, okay, have they asked for our assistance? No, okay, well, I'm not going anywhere near that.
So you're not gonna go in if you hear ICE raids and make sure nobody in the police force is gonna police them and say, "Hey, wait a minute. This guy actually does have papers," or because, I mean, they're making examples of people like I heard about the lady they took off the military base.
Right.
Her son was in the Marines, and they came in and took her off the I mean, so I would think the police would feel some sort of responsibility if, like, they're just going into restaurants and pulling people out. We gotta make sure not only do they identify themselves, but I guess, like, what if they're showing, like, what if they're saying, "Look, man, I'm a citizen," and they're dragging them off, like, who's gonna stop them if not the police?
If the federal or state police are engaged in a operation and they haven't requested and they're not being good guests in the city jurisdiction, we may not even know about it till after it's kicked off or over. Hey, ICE was here. They arrested some people and then bounced. Okay. We didn't get a call. They didn't let us know that they were going to be here. They didn't ask for our assistance. They have jurisdiction even in our city, just like if you're a state trooper, you can pull somebody over in Linwood, you can pull somebody over in the Tri-Cities. Your commission is good for the entire state. Even though I was a city cop, my commission allowed me to arrest anybody outside of Linwood except for on a Native American reservation.
Okay, we're winding down here. Bill, I appreciate you answering all these questions. I'm a little uncomfortable for you because you're just talking a cop speak that I'm not used to hearing, and I really like it. And I'm just thinking, like, I'm about to ask you, how do you reestablish this idea that policing is a service to your community? And now I can see what your answer would be about Linwood, but like, it comes down to this problems if your community doesn't have the money, or you know what I mean? But generally speaking, how do you reestablish the idea that policing services is a service to your community? I mean, is that a PR? Is that a PR campaign that says, "Look, cops are out doing this good, and this good too. Don't forget that." Um, but in some places, maybe they're not. I mean, Linwood just seems like it should be the poster child. Everything you've told me about the Linwood Police Force and your experience on it and the kind of things you did and your ideology of policing sounds just way better than what I'm used to hearing.
The community and even people that, were arrested by us. Not everybody's a fan, but a lot of them are. A lot of them brought experiences from other law enforcement agencies, and I can't tell you how many times I had people go, "Hey, this is the first time I've had a positive interaction with the police." And part of me was proud that we were able to give that to him. Part of me was pissed because what is everybody else doing wrong? And why is this the first? You're 40 years old. You should have had many positive, and maybe it's better if you don't have any, but making sure that you advertise that, hey, we're here for you. Yes, we can address the fact that you were going 17 miles over the speed limit through a neighborhood, but there doesn't always have to be a penalty. Sometimes there can just be a conversation. It doesn't have to be us versus them. It can just be us.
All right. Well, gosh, he is Officer Bill Koontz. You've been a pleasure today, Bill. I really appreciate you having this conversation with me. I feel better about cops now. And I got a message for the rest of you cops that aren't as good cops like Bill. Be better, okay? Don't make Bill do all the heavy lifting here. But thank you, Officer Bill. I hope you don't mind. Hope you won't be offended by the name of this episode, but it is ironic. It's a little tongue in cheek.
I understand your sense of humor, Johnny, and I absolutely approve of 95% of it.
Okay, good. Well, that's good. I can improve. I can get that down to 89, Bill. Just give me a couple more nights of drinking.
No, it's
Well,
been
thank you,
been a
Officer
pleasure.
Bill, for being our fresh face in hell today.
Thank you.